Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jamie Stice. On April 12, 2011, in the small town of Morgantown, Kentucky, with a population of 2,500, 30-year-old Kathy Coy unexpectedly went into labor while driving. She had to give birth in her car on the side of the road, close to her home. Kathy had little time to call her friend, Shelley Lindsay, to inform her that she was about to give birth and needed help. When Shelley arrived, she was in the back seat of the car, covered in blood and holding her newborn. Sadly, the joy of becoming a mother was short-lived. Kathy noticed that the baby was having trouble breathing, so Shelley quickly called emergency services and drove them to the medical center. Kathy's hopes of motherhood were overshadowed by a grim situation. The doctors were very concerned. The baby's condition was critical. He was taken urgently to the intensive care unit due to breathing difficulties and a low body temperature, known as cold shock, which can be life-threatening. The doctors were not only worried about the newborn but also had concerns for Kathy and her family's emotional state during this crisis. The police arrived to investigate the situation. They went to the home where Kathy's children from a previous marriage lived with their grandmother. Officers spoke with the eldest daughter, 11-year-old Brianna, and her grandmother. The children expressed surprise at their mother's new baby, as they did not believe she was pregnant. They mentioned that she intended to meet with a friend who was also pregnant, but no one knew the friend's name. The situation seemed suspicious. Detectives accessed Kathy's social media account and identified a friend of hers, 21-year-old Jamie Stice, who was pregnant. The police attempted to reach Jamie but were unable to make contact. The detectives subsequently reached out to Jamie's mother, Jeannie. She informed them that her daughter was in the final stages of pregnancy and that she hadn't heard from Jamie since 9:30 that morning. Concerned, she was contemplating reporting her daughter as missing but realized that the police might not act quickly since not enough time had passed. While the investigation was ongoing, detectives spoke with Kathy again to clarify the timeline of the incident from that day. Kathy confirmed that she had given birth. She explained that she had woken up early, saw her husband Shannon off to work around 4:30 a.m., and then left to meet her friend Jamie around 10 a.m. After their meeting, as she was returning home, she began to feel contractions. Kathy stopped at a restaurant to grab a quick bite but felt the need to leave in a hurry. Realizing she wouldn't reach the hospital in time, she called her closest friend for assistance. Shelley, Kathy's friend, recounted that when she received the call for help, she rushed outside and saw Kathy in the back seat of a car. Kathy was not wearing pants, only a bloody shirt, and she held a baby in her arms, who was also covered in blood, as if he had just been born. Shelley noticed the placenta and recognized that her friend needed urgent help, especially since the baby was struggling to breathe. She quickly got into her car and drove to the medical center. Shelley observed that the baby was covered in grass and dirt but assumed he had fallen and gotten dirty in the car. There was no time to learn more. Her priority was supporting the newborn. Both women's accounts were largely similar, with one key difference. Kathy claimed that Shelley delivered the baby, while Shelley denied this. The situation was chaotic, with Kathy in labor crying out, and both her and the baby's conditions creating confusion. While doctors worked to assist the baby, Kathy pleaded with them to save his life. There were concerns about whether the situation was staged, leading to the decision to take Kathy in for questioning at the station. At that time, Kathy had already been examined by doctors, and her condition seemed stable. However, when the police began questioning her about her friend Jamie on social media, her story started to change. Initially, she claimed that she had only briefly met Jamie before ending their friendship. Kathy explained that she had driven Jamie to the Social Security office, dropped her off near the building, and then Jamie had left in an unknown direction. At that point, Kathy began to experience contractions, which forced her to leave abruptly. This part of her story raised doubts. To support her new version, Kathy presented a message from Jamie, which allegedly asked her to pick Jamie up from the Social Security office, a request Kathy refused due to complications in their story. However, when detectives expressed their disbelief, Kathy's narrative shifted again. Now, Kathy stated that she had picked up Jamie and taken her home, but Jamie was so exhausted that she collapsed on the sofa. Kathy claimed her contractions only started after this encounter. The significant changes in her story seemed implausible, but she attributed them to the stress of the emergency situation. Detectives aimed to determine the truth about how Kathy and Jamie met. Jamie's mother, Jeannie, stated that they had known each other for only a couple of months after connecting through social media. Jamie is pregnant with a baby. When asked about Kathy's relationship with Jamie, Kathy claimed she had known Jamie for only a few weeks and had been introduced through a mutual friend while seeking help with housing issues. At this point, inconsistencies regarding their acquaintance and its purpose emerged. Kathy couldn't even name this mutual friend, even though Jamie was 20 weeks pregnant, aligning with her due date, which raised further suspicion. Kathy was later informed that something significant might have occurred around 10:30 a.m., right after their meeting. Jamie was missing, and detectives informed the parents that they could not reach out to her. They encouraged Kathy to assist in the search. At this point, they were already skeptical about whether the baby truly belonged to Kathy. Kathy's husband, Shannon, arrived at the station. He was thrilled that his wife had finally given birth, but was confused about why she was being held and questioned. Shannon informed the police that Kathy had experienced miscarriages in the past, which had led her to struggle with depression. Despite the challenges, she remained hopeful about becoming pregnant again and starting a family. He feared that if their efforts failed, their relationship might end. For a woman desperate to become a mother, the thought of losing her husband could push her to desperate actions, even to the point of harming another woman. It was possible that Kathy had pretended to be pregnant to keep her husband with her. Additionally, her friend Shelley, who took her to the hospital during labor, might have played a role in this situation. Kathy frequently visited Shelley and shared stories about her pregnancy, but it was unclear whether Shelley supported Kathy's deception, suspected her, or had unwittingly assisted in a crime. Shelley told the detectives that she had never faced such accusations before. However, during the investigation, it became clear that she was involved in several aspects of the deception. For instance, after Kathy returned from a gynecologist appointment where she learned she was not pregnant, Shelley pretended to be a nurse. Kathy feared that this news could push her husband to leave her, so she asked Shelley to call him, posing as a nurse who confirmed her pregnancy. Shelley claimed she had no idea that Kathy was pretending to be pregnant or plotting anything deceitful. She believed everything was genuine and was genuinely happy for her friend. Kathy managed to convince Shelley, using various excuses, that pregnancy came with complications and that Shelley's support could help save her marriage. Up until the end, Shelley truly believed that Kathy would soon give birth. However, not everyone shares the same perspective as Shelley. When the police spoke to Kathy's other friends and her husband's relatives, it became clear that there had been a lot of discussion about Kathy's situation over the past 6 months. Many people suspected that she had been deceitful. For example, her mother-in-law often tried to reach out to her, hoping to find out the truth. She believes that Kathy is merely trying to deceive everyone, especially Shannon, to bind him to herself. The mother-in-law was very frustrated with Kathy's behavior and discussed it with her son, Shannon. For a short time, he listened to her concerns. A lot of suspicion arose from the continuous delays in the expected due date. The situation dragged on for so long that it started to seem unrealistic, as Kathy herself had no clear idea of when she would give birth. Witnesses noted that over the past few months, her belly has sometimes appeared smaller and then larger. By late 2011, the mother-in-law was convinced that Kathy was lying and was simply afraid of losing Shannon. She managed to persuade her son by highlighting that his wife was clearly deceiving him. He began to demand proof of the pregnancy, which led to even more elaborate deceptions. To maintain the ruse, Kathy stole an ultrasound photo during a visit. This image helped convince her husband, but it was not the only tactic she used. After stealing the ultrasound photo, Shannon is overjoyed about his wife's pregnancy. However, if the truth were revealed, their relationship would be over. His mother insisted that her son had been deceived. In the face of growing doubts, Shannon demanded more proof. His wife was well prepared and even managed to show him a video of their baby's heartbeat, which she had downloaded from the internet. Shannon was repeatedly misled. His mother was disappointed but unaware of the depths of the deception. She simply didn't know Kathy well enough. As the due date approached, Kathy needed more than just a friend acting as a nurse, a video, and a stolen ultrasound photo. After Jamie's disappearance, the photo was used to convince the police and medical staff that Kathy had given birth to the boy. As they contemplated the situation, a troubling image formed in their minds of how Kathy could have acquired the baby and why his mother, Jamie, was missing. Meanwhile, Kathy was already in an interrogation room at the local police station. Despite being stubborn and refusing to admit anything, she continued to provide confused and conflicting testimony, changing her story with each new detail the police revealed. There was no longer any doubt about her dishonesty, but they needed a confession. It was time to employ some tactics. They decided to leave her in the interrogation room alone for a while. This clever move aimed to see how she would respond and what attempts she would make to extricate herself from the situation. The plan worked, but not in the way they had anticipated. Kathy suddenly grabbed her mobile phone and called an unfamiliar number, pretending to talk to Jamie. When the detectives returned, she mentioned it, but she still couldn't provide any information about Jamie. A check on the phone number revealed that she hadn't actually called Jamie at all. The detectives quickly confirmed that there was no doubt that the boy Kathy had brought to the hospital was Jamie's child. DNA testing confirmed this connection. Although the detectives continued to act confidently, Kathy began to waver in her story. Unfortunately, she still refused to acknowledge what had happened to Jamie. The police informed Kathy that witnesses had seen Jamie get into her car alone that morning, and no one saw her come back, contradicting Kathy's claims. They tried to determine where Kathy had taken Jamie. Why was she holding the baby? Doctors noted that the baby's breathing issues and hypothermia were not accidental. He had been born less than an hour before arriving at the medical center, and his airways were still filled with fluid. Kathy seemed overwhelmed and unsure of how to help him, which caused the baby's condition to worsen. Once these facts were revealed, Kathy presented a new version of her story. Kathy revealed that about 9 months before the current incident, she had visited the hospital and learned from the doctor that she had suffered another miscarriage. After leaving the clinic, she encountered a woman named Ashley, who suggested that she could buy a child for $550 that was expected to be born to Jamie, but insisted they would need to wait until the boy was born. Kathy agreed right away and paid, hoping this would help save her marriage. Afterward, she pretended to be pregnant to maintain the deception while waiting for the birth. On the day of the incident, Kathy claimed she took the child from Jamie and left, asserting that she did not harm him. Kathy's account sounded unbelievable. How could Ashley plan such a transaction, and how did she know 9 months in advance that Jamie would have a baby, especially a boy? Furthermore, Kathy could not provide any contact information or even a description of Ashley, making it clear that she was lying. The detectives quickly noticed her inconsistencies. Eventually, she admitted that the story about purchasing a baby was untrue, but she continued to claim that she took the baby from Jamie's home early in the morning, insisting that Jamie simply vanished after handing over the baby. Kathy did not explain how she ended up with a stranger's child in her arms, although it was evident that the child was Jamie's son. Investigators were quickly able to uncover Kathy's identity and found unsettling details about her. Her stepfather, Imran, reported witnessing her shocking behavior on several occasions. He described her as cruel, manipulative, and unpredictable, believing she was capable of committing terrible acts for her own enjoyment and benefit. Imran mentioned that Kathy had once confessed to him her potential to commit murder. Therefore, he was not surprised to see her in police custody, convinced that she could commit any crime and was indifferent to the pain she caused others. It became clear that Kathy was already known to law enforcement. Detectives found a police report accusing her of stalking a pregnant teacher with whom she worked. Their interactions at school were frequent, and Kathy's behavior had become so troubling that it frightened the teacher, who detailed several disturbing incidents. One particularly alarming moment occurred when the teacher was alone in her office and noticed Kathy silently watching her from the aisle. Remarkably, during the time the teacher was pregnant, Kathy also claimed that she was expecting a baby. Later, the the teacher experienced a miscarriage, and shortly after that, Kathy's alleged pregnancy also ended. If these events had unfolded differently, that teacher might have become a victim instead of Jamie. The detectives were determined to extract a confession from Kathy. They were not going to let her leave but needed solid evidence first. There were crucial details that Kathy was not aware of. Despite her persistence, the investigators believed that Jamie was no longer alive. When Kathy and her friend Shelley arrived at the hospital with the child, the placenta was discovered. This raised serious concerns about the childbirth. Normally, placentas remain inside the mother after delivery, leading to suspicions that Kathy had attempted an untrained surgical procedure, similar to a cesarean section. The police interviewed doctors and hospital staff. Experts indicated that if a mother's heart stops, there is typically a window of no more than 5 minutes to save the baby. Kathy was likely aware of this urgency, which may have caused her to act carelessly and make several mistakes that could have endangered her child's life. Detectives believed that Jamie had bled out and died shortly after the brutal procedure began. During the questioning, Kathy began to show signs of distress but did not admit to murder. She continued to weave stories under the detectives' pressure, avoiding direct questions, and suggested that she needed to be placed in a psychiatric unit, implying she was mentally unstable. In response, the police shifted their approach. Instead of pressuring her further, they tried to soothe her, suggesting that her actions might have been accidental. Their goal was to gather any information they could. Kathy was the last person to see Jamie alive, so all suspicion fell on her. The police continued their investigation due to concerns that she might evade capture. The police questioned those closest to Kathy, but no one could confirm her story. However, detectives eventually gathered important information revealing Kathy's true nature. Her own children shared troubling insights about her. Just 2 weeks before Kathy showed up at the hospital with a baby, she had visited a flea market with her kids and purchased a powerful stun gun. The seller warned that this model could incapacitate an adult with direct contact. While testing it, Kathy approached a large stranger at the market and waved the stun gun in front of him. When he remained unfazed, she pressed it against his leg, causing him to collapse. Pleased with her actions, Kathy laughed and walked away. Under pressure from detectives, Kathy began to disclose unsettling details of her plan. She initially wanted to simulate giving birth as realistically as possible, even considering placing the fetus and placenta inside herself. When this proved too complicated, she devised an alternative. Arriving at a friend's house, she sat in the back seat, holding the baby while using cut-out female organs to create the illusion of having just given birth. Regardless, she still refused to reveal Jamie's whereabouts. Her family members confirmed her violent tendencies. In fact, Kathy's own mother was so afraid of her that she took Kathy's children from her first marriage and raised them herself. Shannon's relatives were horrified by Kathy's erratic behavior and urged him to end their relationship. After receiving partial recognition of her situation, Kathy began to elaborate on her belief that she had multiple personalities. She insisted that it was not her, but an alter ego named Lindsay, who approached her friend with the baby. This persona was used to shift the blame for everything that happened to Jamie, although Kathy avoided providing specific details. She frequently mentioned that she belonged in a mental hospital instead of prison. Kathy claimed that when her personality switched, she experienced blackouts and couldn't remember anything. She described instances where she could get into a car, lose touch with reality, and wake up in a completely different part of the city without knowing how she got there. Detectives, however, suspected that Kathy was lying. They discovered that she had previously discussed plans to kidnap another child with her relatives and had even sought her children's assistance. When they refused, she dismissed it as a joke. Kathy's mother recounted how her daughter had repeatedly urged her to help commit murder, but she flatly refused. People who knew Kathy well denied her claims of having a split personality, stating that she had never exhibited such issues before. During the interrogation, Kathy's second personality appeared very self-assured, insisting that no charges could stick to her. Kathy continued to assert that Jamie was alive, despite the severity of Jamie's injuries, which made survival impossible. This bravado quickly faded when Kathy learned she was being accused of murder. After her arrest, Kathy finally agreed to cooperate with the authorities, even leading them to the location of Jamie's body. It was then that the true extent of the crime emerged. Kathy's friendship with Jamie was greatly exaggerated. In reality, Jamie had been another victim of Kathy, who had been stalking her. Kathy had lured Jamie into meetings with gifts and promises of a job. She brought the police to a wooded area where Jamie's body was found, badly mutilated and lifeless, with signs of being shocked by a stun gun on her neck. This was the same stun gun that Kathy had purchased at a flea market with her children just 2 weeks prior to the crime. When Jamie's body was discovered, it was revealed that she had died from multiple stab wounds and excessive blood loss. Kathy had immobilized her with an electric shock gun and then performed a cesarean section in the forest. This is why the baby was found covered in grass and dirt when Kathy brought him to her friend's house. Kathy admitted that she hadn't researched adequately to prepare for such a dangerous procedure. She only looked online once and thought that was sufficient, which was clearly inadequate for someone without any medical training. Kathy, who was 40 years old, was charged with first-degree murder, as well as kidnapping both an adult and a baby. In court, she cried and pleaded guilty to the charges of kidnapping and murder. The baby she had taken from Jamie survived and was later named Isaiah Allen Stice Reynolds, honoring his late mother with his second surname. He was placed with his father. Kathy sent letters to her children explaining what had happened, but those letters contained many lies. She was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her children were placed in a foster home, and her husband remarried, finding a stable partner. In interviews, Kathy's children stated that on the day of the crime, their mother appeared completely normal and was not anxious about the act she was committing. During the trial, Kathy's stepfather expressed his sorrow, not primarily for his relationship with Kathy, but because he was relieved that she could no longer harm anyone. He also felt deep remorse over Jamie's death, regretting that he hadn't reported Kathy to the police after she confessed her intention to kill, believing that doing so might have saved Jamie's life. The case of Jamie Stice is a chilling story of despair, deceit, and unspeakable acts of brutality. Set in the peaceful small town of Morgantown, Kentucky, this tragedy reveals the dark side of the desire to become a mother, leading Kathy Coy down an unforgivable path of crime. Jamie Stice, a young pregnant woman filled with hopes for the future, became a victim of manipulation and horrifying violence, leaving her son, Isaiah Allen Stice Reynolds, motherless from the moment he was born. Kathy was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and must pay for her sins. However, the pain she inflicted on Jamie's family and her own is irreparable. This case serves not only as a warning about the destructive power of deceit, but also raises questions about the boundary between love and obsession. Crime lovers, what do you think about this haunting ending? Leave your thoughts.